Hey, everybody. It's time once again for another one of Maynard's fabulous presentations. How fabulous? You'll be the judge. Anyway, today it's on chapter 20 in sociology, the topic being religion. As you might be able to have tell so far, it's one of my favorite topics. Actually, it's theology is one of my favorite topics, not so much religion. But anyway, as always, I have a few quotes. Arnold Toynbee said all civilizations are based on religion. Now, I've been harping on this all along that this is one of my basic assumptions that all civilizations are based on religion. And so here's the point. If that's true, and our civilization is also based on religion, then that assumes that what we think about religion is an accurate portrayal of reality. I'm going to argue that we have misconceptions and incomplete knowledge about the true nature of the Creator and our relationship to the Creator. Therefore, our civilization is based on false premises. Therefore, our problems, our social problems, are all endemic because they're all rooted in the fundamental misconceptions, misassumptions, incomplete knowledge about the true nature of reality. More on that in my fabulous last presentation. Emil Durkheim said, in humans, social causes substitute themselves for organic causes. The organism is spiritualized. Jonathan Swift, remember him? Yes, Jonathan Swift, Gulliver's Travels. He said, we have just religion enough to make us hate, but not enough to make us love one another. George Bernard Shaw said, there is only one religion, but there is 100 versions of it. Well, sociological concepts of religion go back to Emil Durkheim. He's the key sociologist here, who in 1915 defined, get the words out, Maynard, defined the difference between the profane and the sacred. He said profane is all the ordinary elements of everyday life. And it's from the Latin profanus, meaning outside the temple. Sacred is that which is defined as extraordinary, inspiring a sense of awe, reverence, even fear. It's kind of like my presence in a room. The Latin root means both devotion and holy. Now, I point this out because sometimes we think of profane as a pejorative term, but it's not. It just means the ordinary elements of everyday life, whereas sacred is very special places, very special people, perhaps. These concepts are not new to Durkheim. They actually go back to Plato's Republic, where he defined the distinction between profane and sacred. Religion is defined in your text as a social institution involving beliefs and practices based on recognizing the sacred. Religion is a matter of faith, where belief is anchored in conviction rather than scientific fact. Mark Twain said, faith is believing what you know ain't so. He was a humorist. Now, let me give you an applied sociological example. One time I was watching the local news. You know, watching the news is always quite a treat because they always have these anchor people who are trying to have fun interchanges with each other. It's like, why do they have to be entertaining? Is it enough to watch news? No, we want to like these people because if we like these people, then we'll watch their version of the news instead of the other channel's version of the news. Whatever. But usually their banter is just, ugh. Anyway, so I'm watching the local news, and I believe it was taking place in Bangor. This is a few years ago, town near here. And in Bangor, this guy was taking an old house and he wanted to create a pizzeria out of it. So he's scraping off all the layers of paint, and lo and behold, he finds a vision of Jesus. That's right, a vision of Jesus. All right, now people are coming from all around to come see this vision of Jesus on the wall. All right, so I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking, all right, you know, if he pulled out I don't know, an animal cracker and it looked like the Beeb, I'm cool with that. If he had, I don't know, some goldfish and one of the crackers looked like a Lady Gaga, I'm cool with that too. You know why? Because we know what the Beeb and we know what Lady Gaga looks like. What do you mean this looks like Jesus? Based on what picture? What? Oh, you know, the one with him, the goatee and all that, and this the pro. Nobody knows what Jesus looked like. What do you mean? This is a vision of Jesus. Like, come on, folks. Hey, let me go back to what Mark Twain said. Belief is believing what you know ain't so. Yeah, an old artist rendering of Jesus, like, oh, oh yeah. See, back then they didn't have cameras, so it was just a drawing of Jesus. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what he looks like. You know, one time I was doing students were facilitating discussion in class, and they were doing a PowerPoint, and and they had four different quadrants in the PowerPoint, and one of the quadrants had that same alleged picture of Jesus everybody looks, refers to. And at one point, this is after I did this rap, I pointed out the students, said, "Who's that down in the bottom quadrant?" And they looked at it and they said, huh, "It's a good point. It's supposed to be Jesus." And I go, "Ah, okay, gotcha." Leo Tolstoy said, "Science is meaningless because it gives no answer to our question. The only question important for us, what shall we do and how shall we live?" Sociological analysis deals only with the social consequences of religion. The validity of any religious doctrine is a matter of faith. Well, I know you're pretty excited to get to what's on the test, so let's go to the theoretical analysis of religion, beginning on page 523 with the structural functional analysis. What are the functions of religion? These two are initially developed by Emil Durkheim. 1. Social cohesion. Religion unites members of society through shared values and norms. As visible symbols of this unity, societies use totems, which are objects in the natural world that are imbued with sacred qualities. Perhaps you've heard of the term totem pole that indigenous Native American peoples use. But there are other totems too. For example, the college has totems. An example would be when you make it to graduation, you will see the college marshal marches out with a big mace. That's a totem. Or for example, on the podium, if there's a presentation by the president, where you receive the college seal. I don't mean like the college seal, like, but the college seal. You know, the seal. You know, although wouldn't it be cool if there actually was a college seal? You know, we'd be in class, and the college seal comes in wearing like a cap and a gown. You know, come in, whoa, hey everybody, let's stop. It's the college seal. You know, and have a little bucket of fish and throw it to it. It'd be so cool. You know, where it's graduation day and you're telling your parents, "I'd like my picture taken with the college seal," and they're thinking, you know, it's the big thing on the podium. You know, no, the college seal comes over, it's got its flippers around you, getting a picture taken. Your parents are like, "Oh my God, what do we pay to go here?" As you can see, I have a rather vivid imagination. But you know, seals are all really cool. Like, did you ever see the seals where the seal like bounces on a ball and it plays horns? You know, it can play like Mary Had a Little Lamb. It's going, arr, 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 arr. You know, and then they throw it a fish and it goes, they're awesome. If we only had our own at Cedar Crest. Dream the dream maker. Sports teams are often named for ancestors as another example of totems. For example, need a deep breath here. The Washington Redskins, Cleveland Indians, Kansas City Chiefs, Pittsburgh Pirates, Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia 76ers, or animals, Denver Broncos, Miami Dolphins, Detroit Tigers, Chicago Cubs, Baltimore Orioles, Cedar Crest College, Falcons, Muhlenberg, Mules, Moravian, Greyhounds, Richmond University. I'm just hauling this one out because I like them. The totem, it's the spiders. Ooh. And my all-time favorite is the University of California, Santa Cruz, the banana slugs. Now there's a fearsome image, right? Can you imagine at halftime, you know, the coach is disgusted with the football team. He says, "You guys are playing like slugs. I mean, get out there and slime them." I don't know what the hell to say. How about William Allen? For some of you locals. That's right, the Canaries. Yet another fearsome image. Oh, we're playing the Canaries. Tweet, 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 tweet. Now, I'm told, I can't verify this story, but folklore has it that the origin of the William Allen Canary was because who, for decades, was Allen. This is going back to when it was Allentown High School and it was the Canaries. Who was their arch rival? Could it be the neighboring town, Bethlehem? That's correct. Liberty. What is Liberty? Their nickname is the Hurricanes. What's the only bird that can withstand a hurricane? A canary. I only hope that story is true. Another function of religion is social control. Wait a second. I almost forgot to tell you this. This is under the heading of another one of Maynard's amazing anecdotes. Let's get back to the Cedar Crest College Falcons. I was there when the Falcon was born, so to speak. Actually, before the Falcon, there was really no nickname. For a while there, we were trying to pitch something called, this is when I was helping to coach the basketball team. There was no nickname. We need some kind of a nickname. It was like, okay, I'm a big fan of alliteration. So, hey, how about the Cedar Crest College Classics? Yeah, what the hell's a classic? Like, an old woman with a wash bucket. I don't know, what's a classic? So kind of, it was hard to come up with an insignia. So some years ago, I guess it's about 10 years ago now, a decision was made that the college, all the members of the college community would actually vote on this. And so this went through the academic year, and we got down to 3 nominations, and faculty, staff, and alumni and students would vote among the 3. And by the end of the academic year, the winner was the Falcons. Okay, so at that time, I was doing a lot of extensive work with the student affairs department, and it's the early August, and we're having the first meeting back to get ready for the next academic year. And at that time, the dean of student affairs at that time is announcing to the room, and there's about 20 of us around this big table, announcing to everybody that, what took place over the summer, just to bring us up to speed. Said, well, the main thing has been focused on the Falcon. And so we came up with an official Falcon emblem, because you can't have 50 different versions of the Falcon, and got a Falcon outfit and got some sucker to wear that sweaty thing at sporting events. Hey, no offense if you're that person. And I'm just curious, is it kind of sweaty in there? Does it ever get dry cleaned? How's that work? Anyway, so we had that. She said, hey, and now it's on 3-ring binders in the bookstore. It's on mugs. It's on hoodies. It's on T-shirts. It's painted on the gym floor, So, what developments? And I raised my hand. Now, whenever I'm called upon in meetings, people have learned from past experience that they respond with fear and trepidation, because I'm already gone. And the dean says, yes, Maynard. And I go, and with this was Nancy Roberts, the head of health services. And I said, Nancy, are we still handing out free condoms in health services? Well, yes, we are. Why do you ask? I said, here's my thought. Why don't we put the Falcon on the condoms? You see, then as the condom expands, so do the wings of the mighty Falcon. And then we could put a sign in front of it and say, for a Falcon good time, use these, huh? And there's dead silence in the room as I'm going. So finally, after everybody processes it for a moment, most people with a look of horror on their faces, the dean of student affairs, who totally dug my act, just starts laughing. Right? And then everybody else started laughing. It's like nobody felt it was safe to laugh until the dean did. And then kind of like when she stopped laughing, they all stopped laughing. It was just like watching The Godfather. But, it was like living legend. Bang, hits again. True story, by the way, with only an embellishment here and there. Social control is another function of religion. Secular rulers throughout history were considered by various cultures as ruling by divine right, by God's will. So you had Moses, you had the pharaohs, you had the medieval church in Europe, the Ayatollahs in Iran, the Emperor Hirohito in Japan. In other words, they were seen as divine. And so their leadership was seen as just. Now, this was always a cozy relationship, as I've alluded to in previous presentations, as I'm sure you'll recall. Yes. So, for example, the medieval church. Here are the 90% of the people are peasants, serfs. So why the heck should they go along with this arrangement where the 10% whose nobility is ruling their lives for them? And they're living like dogs. And so why is because the church would say, God says this person should be king. Well, what's in it for the Roman Catholic Church at the time? Vast amounts of land, money, and power, because the nobility had take care of them for anointing this person to be king so that the people would all go along with it, you see. But this is nothing new. This has been happening throughout history. So how did the pharaohs rule supreme? Because you had the priests who would anoint this person as pharaoh. Yeah. And so as a result, what was in it for the priests? Well, they get storehouses of grain, and grain was like money in those days in an arid climate. So anyway, yes, it's an old arrangement. A 19, oh, no, that's not correct. A 2017 study by Carol Tavris and Susan Sod found the following incidents of premarital sex, and this connection to religion. Strongly religious, 61% had premarital sex. Fairly religious, 78%. Mildly religious, 86% had premarital sex. Not religious at all, 89% had premarital sex. Perhaps your pickup line should be, hey, how religious are you? See, I'm trying to tie together a previous presentation here. Many symbols in U.S. society reflect Judeo-Christian notions regarding the government. For example, on the cash, it says, "In God we trust," not Buddha, not in the Creator, not in Hare Krishna. It says, "In God we trust." I think this is always kind of interesting because we have this notion that there's true separation of church and state. The Pledge of Allegiance, unlike what most people think, it does not go back to the founding fathers. Actually came around in the early 1900s, and only later on was under God added to it. But nevertheless, that's a common thing. We say, pledge allegiance under God. How about the President of the United States is sworn in with his hand on the Bible? Someday I hope to say his or her, but not yet. Maybe in 4 more years. His hands on the Bible, so like, what's the deal with that? And then we say, oh, it was separation of church and state. Like, really? Anyway, I've often said, well, what happens? And I don't know exactly what happened when, what's her name? Is it Omar, the representative from Minnesota area who is Muslim? Did she get to swear in on the Quran? I don't know. I'm told, I don't know this for a fact, that there was a representative in the United States, a house from that was a Hindu and did get sworn in on the Bhagavad Gita. I don't know if that's true, but it would just seem reasonable. Why it's like, okay, well, what if you're a Hindu? Yeah, sure, I'll swear my hand on the Bible, and it's like crossing your fingers. A third function of religion is convert meaning and purpose. Religion provides responses to life's big questions like, how do you account for all these boy bands over the years that just come and go, except for the Beatles? They kind of hung around. No, it's big questions like meaning in the face of life's catastrophes and chaos. It also addresses love, although boy, has that seemed to gotten lost in organized religion. Overall, then, religion's primary function is social integration, that we develop internal guidelines and control mechanisms. In other words, that, and I know you'll remember this from my first presentation when I was going through all the key social institutions and what's the function of religion? It's integration. What do you mean by integration? Well, how do you get people to behave? How do you get the people to follow the guidelines? Well, when you have a common religious philosophy, again, I refer to the contemporary Amish, they follow the religion, which guides their everyday life. And so as a result, they wouldn't steal because they've internalized thou shalt not steal. They wouldn't kill because they've internalized, I will not kill. So in other words, it's already in their psyche. That's the function of religion. The critique of the structural functional approach is it downplays the dysfunctions of religion, the divisiveness and conflict that strong religious beliefs engender. It's been the causal factor in many wars, and it contributes to current terrorism. I mean, think of what's going on in the world today that is violent, all due to religious differences. And it'd be one thing if we said, well, my religion's different than yours, but my religion's different than yours, and I'm willing to kill you over it. Hey. Okay, on page 524, you need to know the symbolic interaction analysis, the social construction of the sacred. Peter Berger, sociologist I've referred to and quoted many times in this course, is the key sociologist here. Like other parts of society, religion is seen as a social construction, although perhaps inspired by divine forces. People thereby sharpen the distinction between the sacred and the profane. Therefore, violation of significant cultural norms or sins, marriage becomes holy matrimony, and soldiers fight with God on their side, onward Christian soldiers. Voltaire said, if God made us in his image, we certainly have returned the compliment. Okay, let's go back. When we were talking about horticultural and pastoral societies, do you remember? Was God predominantly a he or a she? It was a she, because in horticultural and pastoral societies, women provided most of the food. 80% of the food was provided by women. So it would only make sense God must be a female, right? And so God was a she. And so we just assume, because most of the time, most religions say, well, no, God's a he, the creator is a he. But that hasn't always been the case in human history. So that's why Voltaire says, if God made us in his image, we certainly have returned the compliment. I'll give you another example. Some religions believe that God is judgmental. But I would argue, why? Because we can't conceive of being non-judgmental ourselves. So we assume God must be judgmental. So we throw that attribute of us onto God. Well, we couldn't. God must be judgmental because we're not capable of being non-judgmental. We actually are capable of being non-judgmental. We just don't practice it very much. Now, you're probably wondering, Maynard, what does classic rock have to say about this? Thanks for asking. Again, all in my book, everything you ever needed to learn, you could have learned from classic rock. It's kind of interesting to me that records have come back. They actually never went away, but for a while there it was CDs, and now records have come back and CDs are fading. So you open up a record, you open it up, and inside the album cover is an album sleeve. And so anyway, from the album sleeve of Jethro Tull's classic album, Aqualung. See, Aqualung was, in case you're not familiar with it, Aqualung was like a bum in the street, so to speak. In the beginning, man created God, and in the image of man created he him. And man gave unto God a multitude of names, that he might be Lord over all the earth when it was suited to man. And on the 7 millionth day, man rested and did lean heavily on his God, and saw that it was good. And man formed Aqualung of the dust of the ground, and a host of others likened unto his kind. And these lesser men man did cast into the void. And some were burned, and some were put apart from their kind. And man became the God that he had created, and with his miracles did rule over all the earth. But as all these things did come to pass, the spirit that did cause man to create his God lived on within all men, even within Aqualung. And man saw it not. But for Christ's sake, he had better start looking. The wisdom of rock. Berger points out that the ability of the sacred to legitimize and stabilize society rests on one major condition. Quote, the socially constructed character of the sacred must go unrecognized, unquote. If we recognize that we created these sacred symbols and beliefs in the first place, they would lose their impact in times of despair. So what he's saying is, okay, at one level, we kind of realized we made the whole thing up. Now, when I say that, let me use Christianity as an example. I, for one, do not deny that 2,000 years ago, there was a person uh, named Jesus who was extraordinary, one of the most extraordinary people to ever appear on the planet. That is a fact. What we made out of it, called Christianity, is a social construction. But if we thought about that all the time, well, we kind of make this all up, well, then how would it help us in times of despair? Berger said, in everyday life, it is just as important that some things can be silently taken for granted as that some things are reaffirmed in so many words. Indeed, the most fundamental assumptions about the world are so obvious, there is no need to put them into words. I'll give you an example. Every time I tell a joke, I'm going to bomb. We don't even have to talk about it anymore. It's just so obvious. Page 520, the critique of the symbolic interaction analysis. It's all very disconcerting, and it pays little heed to religion and social inequality, which throughout this course has always brought us to the social conflict point of view, which is all about inequality. It's on page 524. Social conflict analysis of religion, of course, features Marx's approach, and it also includes feminist theory. Marx saw religion as legitimizing the status quo in society, including social inequality. In so doing, religion is dysfunctional because only a radical change in society can change these patterns of social inequality. He criticized religion as the opium of the people, that it protects the interests of the powerful and religious elites. This is in 19th century England, 1800s. That religion lulls the masses into accepting social disadvantages imposed by the ruling class, said Marx, because the masses believe they will be rewarded for suffering these inequalities in the hereafter. Okay, so the idea being is, listen, of course you're suffering from inequality, but hey, it's just part of God's plan. Don't you worry about it. You'll get your reward in heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Marx said, the more of himself man attributes to God, the less he has left in himself. Well, he said back then that religion was the opium of the masses. We'll see as we get further on in this chapter, people are not subscribing to organized religion as they once did, perhaps in the 1800s. So perhaps a more contemporary version of what lulls the masses might be John Lennon's song, Working Class Hero. And I will quote him in case I get any feedback on words I'm using here. He said, they keep you doped on religion and sex and TV until you think you're so classless and free, but you're still fucking peasants as far as I can see. The wisdom of rock and roll. See, this is under the heading of, did you ever actually listen to the lyrics of songs? Some of them, especially the songs of the 60s, heavy lyrics. Some of the songs now, some do have heavy lyrics, and others like, what mindless bubblegum is that? Anyway, inequality through religion is also seen by the social conflict theorists in patriarchy, and God seen as the ultimate father. What else? Religion also empowers males as religious authorities over females. Look at religions and judge for yourself. It's only in the last couple of decades you see women beginning to ascend to the highest levels in different religions in terms of being bishops or ministers. In the Catholic Church, the current Pope, who's pretty darn liberal, because you notice he just determined that, well, he can't say same-sex marriage because that would violate all Catholic principle. He does favor same-sex civil unions. Anyway, that same Pope also came out some time ago and said that women can never ascend past being nuns. They can never be priests. Okay, religion was also used to justify the colonial exploitation as necessary to convert the heathens. I discussed this a little bit when we were talking about how the slaves were brought over here from Africa, and how one of the justifications, rationalizations for it is, hey, we're going to convert them to Christianity from animism, that pagan stuff, that pagan religion they believe in. And we're going to do them a favor because doesn't it say in the Bible, only he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved? So we're going to save them. The critique of this approach is religion has also promoted positive change. For example, the civil rights movement, nuclear disarmament, anti-war movements, and so forth. And again, as I always recommend to you, go look at the table that compares the three theories. In this case, it's on page 525 to get a quick snapshot. You look at the table. If you don't understand the difference between the, then go back and read it again. Alrighty. What else do we got? I got a lot of things, Maynard. Get to them. I'm going to come back to that. This text is pretty interesting. This chapter is because it gives you a little overview of each of the major religions in the world. I would say one of the best courses, most informative courses I ever took in college was on comparative religions. The person who wrote the definitive book, and it's changed title, used to be called Religions of the World, but it's Houston Smith. Brilliant book, and it really is insightful in terms of learning about the other religions, which I think many of us would benefit from and understanding where they were coming from, that religion was coming from. Okay. You need to know for the exam on page 537, religiosity, the importance of religion in a person's life. In particular, religiosity in the United States. And you will see that here are the key factoids you need to know. 88% of US adults claim to believe in a divine power. 56% claim that they know God exists and have no doubt about it. 58% claim they pray every day. And 31% report attending religious services on a weekly basis. Okay, so that's the key stat. Only about 1/3 actually attend religious services on a weekly basis. In other words, that are that engaged in their particular organized religion. So although most people in the US say they're at least somewhat religious, probably no more than 1/3 actually are. Now, I want to define the difference here between religion and spirituality. To me, spirituality is that which we all ascend to. Now, from the world according to Maynard, and certainly not exclusively me, this is pretty much what all the great gurus say is, you are your spirit. You are your spiritual essence. So it's not about what spirituality is about is realizing your spiritual nature. It's spiritual realization. So spirituality is that which we are, that which we ascend to realize, and religion is one of many possible pathways that can help achieve it. And so if your choice of organized religion is helping you in that direction, that's awesome, So, but that's the difference between it. So I say that because sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm not very religious, but I am spiritual." And so that's what they're trying to describe, that they don't belong to an organized religion, or perhaps they once did, but no longer do, but they still are interested in realizing their spirituality. As is noted in your text, the US is becoming a more what's called post-denomination, meaning don't belong to any particular organized religion, society, where there is a trend away from organized religion and towards spirituality. Lenny Bruce, the great stand-up comedian from the 1960s, who again was one of the first to make the kinds of social commentary that are common by many of today's comics, said, "Every day, people are straying away from the church and returning to God." Excuse me. Let's see. And this post-denominational society has led to what are called New Age seekers. New Age seekers believe in a higher power. Now, I'm always giving you ways to cross-reference this. So to me, the higher power, or another way of referencing it, is the Force in Star Wars. See, why do you think Star Wars is so popular? I mean, if you look at the original Star Wars movies that came out in what, 78, the first one, okay, the graphics, are kind of archaic and so forth, the special effects, but why is it still so compelling for each generation? It's because of the theory of the Force. There's something about that that resonates with us. So the Force is, this spiritual essence that surrounds us and is everywhere and is everything. uh, so New Age seekers believe in this higher power that's everywhere and everything. Two, seekers believe we are all connected. Three, seekers believe in a spiritual world. Four, seekers want to experience the spiritual world. I guess so. Uh, if you believe there is one, you certainly want to experience it. Five, seekers pursue transcendence, to transcend this earthly existence and break on through to the other side, as the Doors said. Some seekers pursue political change to save the environment and create a more cooperative economic system. Survey question asked of the American public about how often do you pray? And the response was every time Maynard schedules an exam. Now, this is significant because Sam Levinson said we should not permit prayer to be taken out of the schools. That's the only way most of us got through. So when you're getting ready to take that cumulative exam, start praying. Now, if you break it down further, who prays the most? Overall, 59% of adults say they pray daily. Women, 66% pray daily. Men, only 43%. Not only are men stupid, they're heathens. African Americans pray daily, 73%. Latinos, 64%. White Anglos, 53%. With some college, 50% pray. With a high school diploma, 57% pray daily. And with no high school diploma, 62% pray daily. You don't have a high school diploma, you better be praying daily. Religion in a changing society. Secularization is a historical trend away from the importance of the supernatural and the sacred. It reflects the shift from a religious understanding of the world to a scientific understanding. In many respects, it represents a decline in the influence of religion, but this decline is self-limiting process, as is described in the section on religious revival. So in other words, it's kind of like a pendulum. And when we start going too far in society to saying science has all the answers, boom, the pendulum swings back and it's like, bring back that old time religion. Science does not have the answers, only God does. And then we get too far in that direction. We go, whoa, 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 we can't just forget about science. That's important too. Okay, there's also civil religion. Robert Bellah defined this term, and he said it's a quasi-religious loyalty binding individuals in a basically secular society. It's where civil rights and practices like patriotism, the national anthem before sporting events, public parades have the power to evoke religious feelings. So you're watching a military parade go by and people are getting tears in their eyes. Or the national anthem. I mean, what a furor over the national anthem before events when Kaepernick started kneeling. Then it came out, well, you can't do this, it's anti-American. And then people actually were veterans in wars said it's not anti-American, it's free speech, it's expression of free speech. And by the way, I always think it's kind of interesting. Where Colin Kaepernick got the idea to kneel during the national anthem? From a veteran. Yeah, he gave him the idea. So to say that it's automatically not supportive of the veterans, not every veteran certainly feels that way. Kind of reminds me of one time when there was a debate about whether or not we have the legal right to burn a flag as freedom of expression and freedom of speech. We do. And it was really controversial. And I remember a Vietnam War vet saying, hey, that's why I went over and shed blood and my buddies died in Vietnam so that you could burn that flag and have the freedom to do so. Okay, you know, and I always used to ask the question, why the heck do we have the national anthem before sporting events? And it turns out it was a response to, was it World War One, where I think it was in baseball, one of the owners decided to be a patriotic thing to help unite the country, just play the national anthem before the beginning of the game. And then it became like a sacred tradition, you know, but it was just something he began to do and everybody caught up. And, you know, you don't play the national anthem before the ballet or the opera or a rock concert. I don't, you know, so it's kind of curious. And then how we defend it as being absolutely necessary. It also used to be the case that they played the national anthem before the athletes came out, you know, so now it gets all convoluted as though this was some sacred religious thing that we have to do, but it's actually a patriotic thing, others would argue, but they got combined, you know. I'll give you another example. What happened on 9/11 was horrific. And the thousands of people who died that day are to be remembered. But why do we refer to that site as a sacred place? Why a sacred place? It is definitely a place we should, is a place we should memorialize, and justifiably so. But how did it become a sacred place? See, again, this blending of religion and patriotism gets a little scary sometimes. Okay. You know, at that time, I remember there's a Muslim, I believe it's a Muslim mosque not too far from where the Twin Towers came down. And after the Twin Towers came down, just coincidentally, they wanted to expand there, and people fought bitterly, like, why would that be contrary to anything? Do you realize Muslims died in the Twin Towers as well? So why would Muslims beginning to expand and build on a new site and expand their mosque, why would that somehow be anti-patriotic or even unacceptable in a country that supposedly separates state and religion? You know, it gets kind of scary. So it's only the religion, not others' religion, even though that was the whole purpose of the separation of religion and state. Remember, people came over here from Europe to secure religious freedom because their religions were being persecuted back there. I also remember on 9/11, I didn't know this at the time, but read about it a little bit later, is people from the Sikh faith were attacked that day and attacked all over the United States. And in fact, in the next 6 months, 2 were killed. And Sikhs their origin is in India, and they wear turbans. And say, well, you're wearing a turban, you must be a Muslim. No, no, dumbass. No, see, that's not, but you know, you look strange and that's good enough for us, you know, so we're gonna attack you and kill you. You might be a Muslim. I'll give you another example. Here in the Lehigh Valley, there's a thriving Syrian and Lebanese community, most of whom, not all, most of whom are Christians. And after 9/11, they too are getting attacked and threatened because you're from the Middle East. That's all we need to do. We're just going to lump you all together from the Middle East, you know. Okay. You know, and this is just Maynard's take on it, you know, and I'm entitled to my opinion. So here we go. See, here's what I think happens. And this is particularly true of fundamentalists in any religion, is deep down, you must believe that your religion is the right religion, or why else would you belong to it? And that's fine. You know, again, I'm all for it if it helps lead you to more love and embrace of other people and, you know, nonviolence and all the things that religion's all about. That's awesome. Okay, so there's a danger in that, though, to think, well, see, my religion is the correct religion, which is an interesting assumption, because even if your religion represents, I don't know, 1 billion people, that means the other 6.4, whatever at in the world right now, are kind of out the line. You chose poorly, but it's cool. And I like the term that we use, we tolerate other religions. And if you take another meaning of the word tolerate, so like, well, we tolerate that, you know, you chose that religion, but I don't think it's the right one. Ours is. Yeah. Nobody says it, but I think it's kind of what people kind of think is, again, why would you believe to it? Well, believe it. Okay, so following this line of thinking, if ours is the right religion, well, then we must be the chosen people because we selected correctly. Yeah. And too bad for the other religions because they're not the right religion. They're all going down, but we're going up. Okay, good, good, good. So our practices are the right practices, our thoughts are the right thoughts, and our policies are the right policies because we're the right religion, we're the chosen people. Now, combine that with patriotism, and you got a scary mix. And it happens all the time in this country. Just for an example, when 9/11 took place, all of a sudden a big billboard appeared on Route 78 because I'd pass it every day, and it said, "Blessed is the nation whose Lord is God." And I go, okay, what's that all about? What's that a reference to? Or W, the president at the time, you know, responded with, as a result of 9/11, we're going to have a crusade against terrorism. Going, dude. People who said, not the C word. See, people in the Middle East, Muslims are still a little sensitive about the crusades, so probably a poor choice of terms for W. Here's another example. This was a couple of days after 9/11. All the members of Congress gathered on the steps of the Capitol and sang, what song do you think? National anthem? That would make sense because it's kind of a war hymn if you really analyze the lyrics. America the Beautiful? Nah, it was God Bless America. What do you think that was all about? So implicit in all this was it's Christianity against Islam. And, it just was a further extension of the Islamophobia that's been in this country going back like 30 years, 40 years. But it's not unique to us either. I'll give you one more example from W. W claimed, go read about this, I'm not making it up. W claimed that before he invaded Iraq, that he had a vision that God told him he should invade Iraq. That's scary. Now, let's flip the side. If you look at Iran, for example, a lot of their activities and terrorism and so forth, alleged terrorism and so forth, is because they're helping to prepare the way for the 12th Imam, not unlike Christianity paving the way for Christ's return. Anyhow, religious fundamentalism is on page 541. You need to know about it for the exam. It's a conservative religious doctrine that opposes intellectualism and worldly accommodation in favor of restoring a traditional, otherworldly religion. Often referred to politically as the religious right. Remember in a previous chat, we were talking about politics, and I said on the left is the liberals and on the right are the conservatives. So this is the religious right. For example, in the most recent elections, Trump got heavy support from evangelicals who are on the religious right. Anyway, it's nothing new in United States history. It's a reaction to secularization, and it occurs in many religions. For example, there is a conservative element in Judaism, in Islam, and in Christianity. You need to know the and who characterizes themselves such. Approximately 25% of the population characterizes themselves as fundamentalists, 42% as moderate, and 33% as liberal. That's going down somewhat because 10 years ago, 35% characterized themselves as fundamentalists and only 25% do, which I think, and with growing numbers of moderates and liberals in religion, which I think is, again, this growing trend toward a more secular society in the United States. So what are the 5 characteristics of fundamentalism that you need to know on page 542? Number 1, fundamentalists interpret sacred texts literally. It's right there in the Quran. It's right there in the Bible. You can read it. I can read it. There's nothing. It is as it is written. 2, fundamentalists reject religious pluralism. Tolerance and relativism weaken faith. Their religious beliefs are true and others are not. So there is no toleration of tolerance, I should say, of other religions for fundamentalists. There is only their way. 3, fundamentalists pursue the personal experience of God's presence, a personal relationship with Jesus in the case of Christians that should be evident in one's everyday life. And 4, fundamentalism opposes secular humanism, pursuing science for answers rather than pursuing God for answers. Albert Einstein said, science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. Carl Sagan said, the notion that science and spirituality are somehow mutually exclusive does a disservice to both. And 5, many fundamentalists endorse conservative political goals. Getting back to fundamentalism opposes secular humanism, one of the debates or factors, I should say, with the pandemic is that many evangelicals, most of whom supported Trump, don't believe science is real as such. They don't follow science, or they think it's fake, and so they didn't believe in climate change, and they thought that many thought that the pandemic was a hoax because you don't believe in science, you believe in religion. Okay, fundamentalism is in part a product of our frontier history. This kind of reminds me of me in these presentations. Our frontier history, in which circuit preachers employed dramatic presentations in the hopes of an immediate conversion by those attending. I'm trying to convert you to the church of how to pass the exam. People often ask me, do you belong to a church? I do. I belong to the church of what's happening now. Is there such a church? Sure. Fundamentalism is less pronounced in Europe, also because European churches are more established and usually linked to the state, the government. For example, up until the year 2000, when you were born in Norway, you were automatically a Lutheran as soon as you popped out of the womb, but they kind of got rid of that. Among Christians, evangelism refers to the movement to spread the word of the Gospels. The Gospels is the good news. Most Christian fundamentalists are conservative evangelists. Some fundamentalists are Pentecostals who stress the personal experience of the Holy Spirit. Now, a survey question asked, would you say that you have been born again or have had a born again experience? That is, a turning point in your life where you committed yourself to Christ? Yes, 36%. No, 62%. 2% didn't know. How the hell would you not know if something that dramatic ever happened to you? Yeah, one night I was drunk, a lot of shit went down. Maybe that happened too. I don't know. Which of these statements comes closest to describing your feelings about the Bible? The Bible is the actual word of God and is to be taken literally. 25%, exactly the same percentage who claim to be fundamentalists. The Bible is the inspired word of God, but not everything in it should be taken literally, word for word. That was 47%. The Bible is an ancient book of fables, legends, history, and moral precepts recorded by men. 20%, and of course 8% didn't know, or I prefer didn't. It could have been not respond, but it's more comical to say, oh. For any religion, literal interpretation of sacred texts has the effect of sharply limiting debate among adherents as to truth, thereby fostering consensus. But literal readings may still reveal inconsistencies. There are, for example, 2 creation stories in Genesis. Okay, I think I mentioned, maybe I didn't, when we were talking about diversity, that many times people will cite the Bible as to why they oppose homosexuality and same-sex marriage, and yet a Jesuit priest, who the Jesuits are like the scholars of the Catholic Church, went through the entire Bible and found over 200 verses that condone homosexuality. So, and this is a typical conversation. There's a certain unreasonableness to a fundamental approach to taking whatever's in the sacred text literally. And the problem with that is, so if I point out, as I did to this person who's a fundamentalist, I said, but see, what about these verses that condone homosexuality? That's stuff people inserted into the Bible. And I say, okay, but couldn't I make the same claim about the verses you cite that say homosexuality is wrong, because doesn't God love everyone? No, absolutely. That's not true. That is what God put in. What you're saying is in the Bible is what people put in. So it's an unreasonable argument. They're not willing to admit the other side that, well, maybe this doesn't make sense because it is rather inconsistent with the God of perfect love, isn't it? At least in the world according to Maynard. Maynard covers his ass. Okay. These are just Maynard's opinions, folks. Let's not freak out. All right. Well, I'm going to give you Maynard's version of the history of religion here, because I'm going to try to make a point and see if I ever get there. Okay, so religions began with, let's go back here, Maynard. Religions began with, we'll go back to animism. A-N-I-M-I-S-M, animism. Animism is what indigenous peoples practice. Native Americans. I always laugh about Native Americans. Talk about a stereotype. We used to persecute the Native Americans and try to convert to Christianity or we'll kill you. It's your last chance. Yeah, that's what God would want because they're heathens. Anyway, so, because look at your pagan religion. It's called animism. Animism is from anima, not enema. Anima. Enema is a real pain in the ass. Anima. Anima means life, breath of life. So animation, like cartoons that make it look life. Okay, so animism is breath of life. And essentially it said that consciousness, the creator, is found everywhere, everything, and so there were sacred mountains and this was sacred and that was so, God is everywhere. The creator is God, creator, whatever you imagine God to be is everywhere and everything. Okay. Following that came polytheism. And polytheism is many gods, and it's the belief that poly is God. And that was why the original communion was Polly wants a cracker. That's not true. I was just seeing if you were paying attention. Huh? That doesn't make sense. I'm just seeing if you're paying attention. Okay. No. Polytheism means many gods. So you have like the Viking gods or the Greek gods or the Roman gods, where there's like a head honcho god, but then there's subsidiary gods and then gods under that, which all have rule different aspects of life. So God isn't everywhere and everything. Like with animism, there's many gods though, even though there's sort of a head honcho god in charge. Which reminds me of yet another one of Maynard's amazing anecdotes. Would you like to hear it? If not, just pause until I'm done. But I'm going forward anyway. So my son, and who could blame him, one day announced that he wanted to inherit, as I call it, the Cressman comedy empire. As in, Dad, can I be as funny as you? I doubt it, but hey, I'll try to help you out. So, he wanted to be the class clown. And I tried to point out to him, you don't understand. The class clown isn't all glory. I can tell you how much time I spend in the principal's office for saying things in class, and it's always a crapshoot. It's a cosmic crapshoot. You're going to say some things that some people just go crazy over, and other things where you're just going to pay the price. He didn't hear the bad. He only heard, I want to be the class clown, but the rest of the class looks up to my comedy. Anyway, so he wanted a couple of jokes to use. So, okay, so what are you guys studying in class right now? Well, they were studying the Native Americans. And the Native Americans, I forget what grade he was in, but it was the thing where they had the map, they bring down the map and they show where all the indigenous peoples live, where the tribes were in America. So there were 540 tribes, if I remember that correctly. So all where the different tribes were, like here in the Lehigh Valley, it was the Lenape. Anyway, so they're going through all that and carefully prepared Tyler with a joke and to get done. And the guy, the teacher, I said I would get back to this. Teacher was also referring to the Trail of Tears. And the Trail of Tears was in the 18, Maynard get the date right, maybe 20s, 30s, don't quote me on that, somewhere in that time frame, where we, the American government, drove the Seminole and the Creek Indians out of Florida and Tennessee, that neck of the woods. There was another group too, and I can't think of the third tribe. But anyway, they just moved them out, and we're going to move them to Indian territory, which at that time was Oklahoma. It's kind of comical because, you know, when you see different maps of the United States at that time, you know, as you start from colonial times, there was always the Indian Territory, the Indian Territory, and the Indian Territory, and it kept moving further and further west and got smaller and smaller and smaller. So now it's going to be Oklahoma. But think about this. Think about what the climate is like in Oklahoma and what the you know, it's kind of a range area, and you know, it's kind of arid in certain parts of it. So we're going to take people who used to live in Florida and Tennessee, and we're going to move them to Oklahoma, and they'll be happy there. Well, these tribes have never survived in a climate like that and conditions like that. And many died, the Trail of Tears, many died en route, you know. And that's when Henry David Thoreau wrote how shameful it is to be identified as an American today. It was in reference to the policy called that the Indian Removal Act that resulted in the Trail of Tears. Anyhow, so Tyler raises his hand as we rehearsed, and he says, "Excuse me, but I think," to the teacher, he says, "Excuse me, but I think you forgot one of the Indian tribes." He said, "Oh, I'm just looking over. I don't know what tribe would that be, Tyler?" And he said, "Well," he said, it's one of the tribes that got lost during the Trail of Tears. They didn't get lost; they escaped. And he said they were called the Hagawi Indians. And he goes, "Oh, geez, really? I didn't know." He said, "Yes." He said, "Because they weren't familiar with the terrain, and they escaped the march, but they get to the next bluff and they wouldn't know where they were. And the chief would go, 'Hey, we're the Hagawi. Hagawi Indians get,' boom, sent to the office." Now I cleaned it up for him. It was actually the Fagawi Indians, but nevertheless, you know, he came home, he was all, "Dude, what did I tell you? It's a cosmic comedy crapshoot. You never know how people are going to react." Now, years later, are you going to bring this back, Maynard? Yes. Years later, they were studying the Greek gods, right? Polytheism. So, okay, this teacher hopefully had a better sense of humor. I prepped Tyler with another joke. So they're going over all the Greek gods, and Tyler raises his hand, reads down, and he says, "I think you missed one of the Greek gods." He goes, "Really?" He said, "What one would that be?" And Tyler said, "Oh," Tyler said, "The Greek god of sex." And he said, "Oh, really? Who would that be?" And he said, "Testicles." And the teacher thought it was funny. See, so I told him, you never know. If you don't get that joke, I can't help you. All right. Next came monotheism, a singular God, Yahweh, Allah, God in Christianity, not multiple gods, the God, a God, singular God. So you can see how it's whittled down from everything's God to multiple gods to a God. Okay. Then we get to the Enlightenment. So the Enlightenment launches secularism in an unprecedented level. So, and it begins to challenge the Roman Catholic Church, because the Roman Catholic Church at that time, like think about when the Spanish Inquisition took place, which is just before Columbus set sail. But anyway, Spanish Inquisition was all about purging people who were practicing heresy. In other words, they were saying things that were inconsistent with what the Roman Catholic Church's proclamations were, particularly, but not exclusively, related to science. So the Enlightenment featured all these new developments in science and new understandings of the world and Newton's physics and so forth. And it contradicted the church. So the Roman Catholic Church in medieval Europe said, recant what you just said or die, because the Roman Catholic Church was thinking that Earth was the center of the universe and everything was about man and the way they describe God's relationship to man and so forth. And so anything that even would suggest that that wasn't, so for example, the development, the scientific finding that the Earth's not the center of the universe, in fact, it's not even the center of the solar system. No, that's contradictory. Anyway, so eventually secularism wins out, and the Roman Catholic Church agrees to the Cartesian separation, that anything having to do with consciousness, spirituality, blah, blah, the mind, that will be the church's province. Anything to do with the body, that will be science's province. And that division kind of ruled for a long, long time, up until even, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago. Only then did we begin to do serious scientific studies of the whole nature of consciousness. One of the great mysteries of science, consciousness, the fact that you are aware of the fact you were aware. Yeah. I think, therefore I am. Yeah. And yet science knows virtually nothing about it. Yeah. And so neuroscience can take us only so far, because it just discovers the physiological processes taking place in the brain. But thought doesn't take place in the brain is also been fairly well established. And so what's happening? Where does it come from? What's going on? We have no idea. And yet it's probably the most important singular question about life itself, about the nature of reality, is what is consciousness? Anyhow, so secularism is well described in Newton's physics. Newton, brilliant physicist. And so Newton in the 1600s, he describes the universe as being like a giant machine, like a giant clock. And it has moving parts, and it's set up in a way that it just runs. It is the way it is. There's nothing we do about it. There's nothing we can do about it. But we can understand it. And so you can take a clock apart and understand all its component parts. And you can do the same thing with nature. You can understand its component parts and understand how this amazing, incredible machine operates, which he also thought, people sometimes would say, he also thought it was divinely set up that way. But anyway, once set up, it's just the way it runs. The founding fathers were deists. They shared that philosophy that it just runs, just is. Now, what this suggests is it's predetermined for us, in the sense that our lives are even predetermined, and that we get to operate in this physical universe that we can't do anything about changing, and it just is the way it is. So anyway, and everything has a cause and effect, in the sense that, I don't know, if I have a pen and if I have a cup on the desk and I knock it over, boom, it falls over. You can measure all these effects. I mean, many of his insights are brilliant and still do explain how much of the physical universe operates. Okay, then we get to the late 1900s, and around that time, people believed that everything around us was called the ether, because they didn't know really how to describe it, that there's something around us, not talking air, but the whole thing that pulls everything they called it ether. And then that became sort of a discredited theory, and they proved there is no such thing as the ether. And that became kind of revolutionary, because again, they're trying to understand the world. And then comes Einstein with his famous equation, E equals mc squared. Now, I'm one of the few people who gets chills when I think about it, but what does it mean? You probably came across it somewhere in school. E is energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Okay, so effectively, to simplify things, the speed of light squared was a way of evening out the equation. What it's trying to say is energy and mass, energy and matter are the same thing. They just exchange each other. So energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It just converts into mass, or mass converts back into energy, but they're the same thing. So they're not separate things. They are the same thing. Think about that for a moment. Energy and matter are the same thing. Okay, so that was rather profound. Now, again, what happened is science followed a reductionist philosophy, and a reductionist philosophy means, okay, so how do we understand the clock? Well, we break it down its component parts. Okay, so same thing. So we get down to the cellular, then we get down to the molecular level, and then starting in the early 1900s, the 20th century, in the early part of the 20th century, we then could begin to look at the atomic level, and then even the subatomic level. And this led to the discoveries of quantum physics, which came soon after Einstein. Einstein initially opposed some of the discoveries of quantum physics, but again, they're trying to get down to what are the building blocks of reality. So we're getting down further and further and see, okay, what is reality built on, following, basically what Newton said, that this was discernible. I also want to point something else out that Einstein said. He also demonstrated conclusively, scientifically, that there is no past, there is no future, there's only the present. Now, I point this out because that's exactly what the mystics have said for thousands of years. There is only the eternal now moment. There is no past, there is no future. Now, I want to be careful to point out I am not making the claim, as some New Age folks do, that science confirms mysticism. No, at best, I'm willing to say science is not at odds with what mysticism has preached for thousands of years. Again, mysticism meaning the core elements of all the world's religions. The mystical elements. So, for example, in Islam, it's Sufism. In Judaism, it's the Kabbalah. In Christianity, it's Gnosticism. So they all have these mystical, these were the original elements of the organized religions we see today. And it's really interesting too, because the fundamentalists totally oppose the mystical elements. So for example, ISIS would attack Sufi mosques all over whenever they come across and destroy everything, because it's the polar opposite of their belief in the religion, which is everything is literal. The terrorism comes out of this incorrect fundamentalist interpretation of Islam. Okay. What do we have here? Einstein said, I want to know God's thoughts. The rest are details. Einstein also said, everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe. Okay, so he also develops the theory of relativity. I'll get back to quantum physics in a moment. The theory of relativity is that there's a time-space continuum. Interestingly, and so and space is like, it's like waves and so forth. It's we discover more about what is out there in space, in the universe, and that gravity, like if you imagine you have a stretch sheet and then you have the planet Earth on it, it creates like an indentation in the sheet rather. And so that's what they found, that there are actual waves and so forth in the so-called gravity. And gravity is nothing more than there is a pull, but it's a distortion in the space-time continuum as a result of the Earth sort of bending that sheet, so to speak. I'm explaining this poorly. You'd have to see the graphics. So anyway, so quantum physics develops, and it's an examination of subatomic particles. So what does quantum physics begin to find? Well, they find, okay, everybody kind of knows this. There's the atom, and the atom's composed of a nucleus, and there's an electron cloud. Now, originally it was like there's electrons that are circling like orbits, like the solar system where the planets orbit the sun. But they found it's more like an electron cloud. It's not just and they found that the nucleus to the electron is like a peanut in the middle of a football stadium, and the electron cloud is the 700 level in the back seats. That's the amazing gap between them. So in other words, at the subatomic level, at the atomic level, it's mostly empty space. Okay, so what does this all play out? This is science, folks, not Maynard's opinion. When you touch something, it's the electron clouds on the bottom of your shoes, so to speak, contacting electron clouds on the floor, giving us the sensation of solidity, but it's actually not. So you look at anything in front of you, your desk, whatever, and it appears amazingly solid. But if you actually looked at it from another level, you would see it's 99.99999999999% empty space. But boy, is it compelling, isn't it? It looks like, and it feels, and you're touching, going, now, wait, I'm touching it. It's the electrons in the end of your fingertip repelling the electron cloud on what appears to be this solid desk. And that sensation is called touch. Nothing touches anything. Science, folks, not making it up. Okay, give you another example. Let's suppose, I always like those science fiction movies where they shrink people down, they go into the human body and stuff. Okay, so let's say we're going to shrink you down, we're going to give you a video camera. Now get down there and just show what you saw at the subatomic level, and then we'll look at the video when you come back. Okay, we're going to look at the video. You know what we're going to see? Nothing. There'll be nothing to see. Now, because it's almost all empty space. Everything you see around you is mostly empty space, even though it sure doesn't appear that way, does it? Subatomic particles are actually what quantum physicists call wave packets, which is a concentration of energy. They also found that it has a dual wave particle quality. In other words, they began to do experiments, and Einstein actually kind of began to tip people off about this. The idea was, well, what is light? Is light waves or is it particles? You know, okay, so one school thought, well, it's photons, and we can demonstrate that it's particles called photons because we've done experiments that clearly demonstrate that. Yes, but then they did other experiments that clearly shows it's a wave. Well, were some of the experiments wrong? No, they're totally consistent and reliable. But one shows it's a wave and another shows it's a particle. So then they began to realize, OMG, it is both. These wave packets are simultaneously a wave and a particle. So Newton says, something can't be two things, it's one or the other. They say, no, at the subatomic level, a wave packet is both a wave and a particle simultaneously. It's the wave particle hypothesis, dual wave particle hypothesis. But here's what's even spookier. If you try to measure its location through an experiment, it becomes a particle. If you try to measure its momentum, it becomes a wave. And you can't do both measurements simultaneously. So until you measure it one way or the other, it is both a wave and a particle. And the great quantum physicist Heisenberg dubbed this Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. We don't know what it is yet. It's both. It sits in what quantum physicists call superposition. It's there, but it's neither a wave nor a particle until we measure it as such. And then it becomes whatever we measure. Get it? It's spooky, but it's true. It is pure potential until measured, but another way of putting it is until observed. And then it collapses into a singular entity, either a wave or a particle, called collapsing, right? So until it's measured, observed by consciousness, only then does it become one or the other, a wave or a particle. Okay, so this gets to the experiment, and it's a thought experiment. Another one of the great quantum physicists was Schrödinger. And Schrödinger came up with this thought experiment called Schrödinger's cat. So he said, okay, so this is crazy, and yet it's scientifically true. See, here's one of the interesting things about quantum physics. It's so incredibly mysterious. It's like Alice in Wonderland, and yet it is the most mathematically proven of all the sciences. So it's true. They just don't know what to make of it. And I'll give you some of the theories about this. Okay, so Schrödinger's cat is, there's a cat in a box, and the cat has food, but it doesn't have food. And so the cat in the box is either being fed and is alive, or simultaneously is dead because has no food. And so what is it? It's neither, until you open the box and determine that, you want to find a cat that's alive, it'll be alive. You want to find a dead cat, it's a dead cat. Okay. I'll give you another example. Let's suppose I simultaneously sent you and somebody else a gift, and you simultaneously receive it. One person's in Los Angeles and the other's in New York. Now, the person in Los Angeles opens the box 1 second before you do, and hopes it's a guitar, and boom, it's a guitar. And so it could be anything in the person's box in New York, but because you already opened it, it's a guitar. The person opens the box and it's a guitar. But what I sent you was, it could have been anything, right? That's kind of another way of explaining it. And this is science. This is true. Um, so what does it all mean? Okay, let me give you another example. There is also the famous Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paradox, which was demonstrated in the lab. And what it was two identical particles. In other words, these were particles created at the same time. And it was interesting because this was actually done to refute quantum physics because Einstein initially didn't have buy-in to it. And so two particles are linked together, right? And then they're shot off into opposite directions across the universe. Well, they found out that if you suddenly measure the spin on this one, instantaneously, the other one, even if it's a universe apart, gets the opposite spin, right? Simultaneously, not a few seconds later in measure, simultaneously. Now, this is interesting because Einstein said nothing can go faster than the speed of light. And yet this is happening faster than the speed of light in physical reality. How do you explain it? Are they somehow communicating with each other? How do you explain it? That, you know, there are theories on what's going on or hypotheses, but nobody knows. All I can tell you is this happens in experiment after experiment after experiment, and nobody knows. So I'm going somewhere with all this, in addition to giving you a little bit about quantum physics, which is really fascinating stuff to read. You're going, oh yeah, Maynard, maybe you think so. Okay, so let me give you an applied example. It's estimated that, so it appears like these two particles are connected in some way. That there's some kind of non-local effect taking place. Non-local effect meaning that, give you my example before, if there's a cup on a desk and I knock it over, yes, I personally knocked it over, it has a local effect. But this is a non-local effect. How could me doing something here affect something a gazillion miles away? And so all of a sudden, this whole concept of non-locality became an accepted understanding scientifically of what's happening at the quantum physics level, that things can affect other things even if they're not physically proximate to one another. Okay, so here's a possible a hypothesis about how this might work. So if you follow the Big Bang theory, not the show, the theory. So I don't know, I guess it's now about 12.7 billion years ago, supposedly the universe was created. And so at that time, all the matter in the universe was congealed into one mass. Now, I always think this is fascinating. How big do you think that mass was before it all exploded into the entire universe? It's estimated to be about the size of a golf ball. All the matter in the universe was the size of a golf ball. Now you go, well, it's highly concentrated. Nevertheless, the size of a golf ball, and then boom, it exploded and created the universe. That's why it's not surprising if you follow that line of thinking that the universe is 99.9999999% empty space, because that's all the matter there is, right? Okay, so all these particles were once touching each other. Boom, now they expand out. Well, following the principle of non-locality, they are still somehow connected in some way, which is not inconsistent with what the mystics say, that everything in the universe is interconnected and interpenetrated. And that's why you get the theory, for example, of the butterfly effect, that if a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, it can affect the weather in North America. Or put another way, everything you do is affecting everything else in the universe, and everything that's happening in the universe is affecting you because we're all connected. Everything is connected. Okay. Well, let's see. Um, So the other thing that was determined is that everything appears to have a vibration. Everything is vibrating. It reminds me of the 60s. Hey, did you get that vibe? Did you feel that vibe about people, about everything? That everything has a vibration. So everything is vibrating. Everything is alive. Everything is moving. You know, you go, that's, well, there's nothing moving there. Yes, there is. If you looked at a subatomic metal, it's moving at a furious level. A rock, everything's moving at a furious level and ever changing. Here's another thing that's interesting about the electron cloud, and here's where quantum physics comes in terms of its mathematical probability. What they noticed about the electrons in an electron cloud is they kind of appear and disappear, like they blink on and off. in nanoseconds, but they blink on and off. And so it disappears, boom, it reappears, disappears, reappears, disappears, reappears. And with mathematical precision, they can predict the probability of where it will reappear. But they can't say with certainty where it will, but with mathematical precision, the probability where the electron will reappear. So some have theorized, well, where does it disappear to? Does it disappear to another reality and then it appears again? Because we don't know. We just know that's what happens, right? So let's go back over it. A particle wave, now these are the things that make up physical reality. A particle wave is both until it's observed, quote, measured. And so when consciousness observes it, it becomes either a particle or a wave according to what we want it to be, according to how we measured it. Okay, so I'm just going to extrapolate this out with some of the hypothesis about what this all means. And this was a common agreement among many of the quantum physicists that this is what it all means. And this is what Einstein found so disturbing is, I'll give you an example. You go into your kitchen at night and you look around and it is all, everything's in superposition before you enter the room. And as soon as you enter the room, it becomes the kitchen you expect to see. Now, if I go into the room, I will see it slightly differently than you were because it's the kitchen I don't know expect to see, but it's what I will see because I am consciousness observing the particles and bringing them up to appear. And as soon as you walk out of the kitchen, turn out the light, it goes back into superposition. So only when sentient beings are around to observe it is the kitchen actually physically there. Other than that, it snaps back into superposition. It's just potential, right? And so this is what Einstein found that was so disturbing. He said, I'd like to believe that the moon is there whether I'm looking at it or not. But quantum physics said it's not unless you're observing it. How about that, huh? Now, this is not inconsistent with what the ancients described. In Eastern mysticism, they said, this is the grand illusion. It's not real. It just appears to be real. It's called Maya, the great illusion, right? Just throwing it out there. So what is real? Okay. You know, with time and space, the other thing I think is kind of interesting about it, when you talked about a time-space continuum, Einstein, is, just to give you an example, if you took off in a rocket and you could go fast enough in the rocket to circle the Earth while it was still taking, you could actually watch yourself taking off in the rocket. If you could fly, if you could move at 99.999% the speed of light, off the top of my head, I can't remember how far away the center of the universe or the center of the the Milky Way galaxy is, but it's many light years away, nothing about space-time continuum. So that's why we measure space distance in how fast light will pass in 1 year. So again, time and space being very similar, being essentially the same thing. Okay, so the idea would be it is multiple light years away. And I wish they knew, and you can quick Google it to check me out on this. But if you Google at night, if you were in a rocket ship and you go 99.9% speed of light, you could go there and back in 2 years, right? 2 years, right? Now, in that time you were in the spaceship and you came back, everything on Earth would have passed at 562 generations. That's how everything would have aged, but you have only aged 2 years. This is fact. This is not myth. This is scientific fact. 562 generations where you were going. So, hey, everybody be long gone. Anyway, and if you could go at the speed of light, you would be everywhere at once. Okay, now think about this, where yogis were able to appear and disappear. Allegedly, people observed this, appear and disappear and appear somewhere else instantaneously because they figured out how to move at the speed of light. They had achieved an understanding of how the nature of reality can be manipulated. Now, these aren't miracles. These are simply people who have gotten evolved enough achieved certain level of self-realization where they realized how to manipulate this, what appears to be physical reality, within the existing laws of physical reality. So energy in a cubic centimeter of space, to give you another example, what appears to be empty space, there's enough energy to boil away all the oceans. So everything is an energy, is vibration, it's energy. Everything you see around you is energy vibrating in some way, shape, or form. All physical matter is energy vibrating. So as energy slows down the vibration, it becomes physical matter, what appears to be physical matter. If it goes vibrating faster, it becomes energy that we can't necessarily see or perceive. So, key point, without consciousness acting as an observer and interpreting, everything would exist only as pure potential. Consciousness is the activating mechanism that turns energy into physical matter. So the understanding is that everything around us is a form of consciousness, yeah? In the sense that consciousness activates, consciousness interacts with everything and creates the physical reality. And so as we go through the history of religion, boom, we go right back to animism that says consciousness is everywhere. So I always think it's pretty interesting now, you know, that we understand more. We go, oh my God, those Native Americans, instead of heathen nitwits believing in some pagan philosophy, we go, my God, they're holy spiritual people, which is just another, you know, stereotype. I'll give you one last example. Imagine you have a CD changer. Are they even still around? I mean, but the idea is you load this sucker up with 10 CDs, and then you can program it to play at any in any interval you want. You know, CD 1, song 2, CD 3, song 4. Okay, so you got your CD changer. Cars used to have them too. So anyway, you have it all set up. Now, the point is, here's the present. Here's your CD changer. Now you have the whole thing programmed. So now you're listening to song 1. So song 1 on disc 4 is the present. Now, as you're sitting and listening, oh, I can't wait to hear song 4 on disc 2, which I have it programmed for, to hear next. That's the future. Okay, now you're done listening to song 1. That becomes the past. And now you're listening to song 2, which is the new present. And you're waiting for the next song, which is the future. Okay, but here's the point. They're all in the CD changer right now, in the present. It's just an illusion that there's a past and a future to it. Everything is all happening at once. I'll give you another scary thought. When people talk about, if you believe in reincarnation, well, I've had future, I've had past lives. Well, that means you also have future lives. But here's the other eerie point. They're all happening at once. All your lives are happening at once. And so some people say, oh, well, that's what, so mystics, that's what deja vu is. You're contacting some of your other selves who are living in other parts. So this Maynard is just one version of the greater self of which Maynard and all these other lives are a part. That's enough for you to absorb for now. Alrighty. You know, the other thing I think is interesting is all the great quantum physicists all realized that they reached the end point of their understanding through physical discovery. And so to understand what this all meant, virtually every one of them went toward mysticism. And I actually have a book of the mystical sayings of the quantum physicists who realized they could not find the answers through physical discovery. They had to go to another level, to mysticism, to the spiritual level, to try to understand what it is they had discovered in the physical realm. Hey, that's all I got for today. And we'll start with chapter 21 real soon. Have fun, take care, and stay healthy.